The Henderson County incident. In the early morning hours of March 15, 2019, the Emergency Dispatch Center in Henderson County, North Carolina, received a call that would disturb operators for weeks. It was 3:47 a.m. when the phone rang, and on the other end of the line, a trembling male voice could barely form coherent words. 911, what's your emergency? Operator Sarah Mitchell, with 15 years of experience, was accustomed to dealing with panic situations, but nothing would prepare her for what she was about to hear. There's something in my truck. It's not human. Please, send help. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, a 42-year-old truck driver making his usual route along Highway 64, transporting electronic equipment from Charlotte to Virginia Beach. The complete audio of this call leaked months later and went viral on the internet, generating millions of views and endless debates about its authenticity. But for those who investigated the case closely, including state police officers, paramedics, and witnesses, the mystery goes far beyond simple online speculation. Marcus had stopped at an abandoned gas station approximately 20 kilometers south of Henderson. He knew that stretch of road like the back of his hand, having made this route 3 times a week for the past 7 years. The station had closed about 2 years earlier, but the parking lot was still occasionally used by truck drivers for quick breaks. That night, Marcus needed to check one of the engine belts that had started making a strange noise. It was around 3:30 a.m. when he parked. The moon was in its first quarter, providing only dim lighting. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and got out of the truck, leaving the driver's door slightly ajar. The air was cold and humid, typical of spring in the south. He remembers hearing crickets and the gentle wind through the trees surrounding the old station. It took only a few minutes to check the engine. Everything seemed to be in order, probably just a leaf stuck in the belt. When Marcus closed the hood and started walking back to the cabin, that's when he felt something different. An absolute silence had fallen over the place. The crickets had stopped singing. The wind had ceased. It was as if all of nature was holding its breath. Marcus is a pragmatic man, not someone given to superstitions or irrational fears. But at that moment, every instinct in his body screamed that something was terribly wrong. He quickened his pace toward the truck cabin, climbed in, and closed the door. It was then, as he reached for the keys in the ignition, that he heard it. A sound coming from behind, from the cargo section of the truck. It wasn't a sound he could immediately identify. It was something between a scratch and a snap, like long nails scraping against metal, but with a deliberate rhythm. Marcus froze. His truck was sealed. He had checked all the locks himself before leaving Charlotte. There was no way something or someone could have gotten in there, but the sound continued. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. That's when Marcus saw through the side rearview mirror. A figure was outside the truck near the rear. His first reaction was relief, probably dialed 911. During the 6-minute call, which was recorded and later analyzed by forensic audio experts, the panic in his voice is clearly audible, but there are also background sounds that baffled investigators. "It's trying to get in," Marcus shouted to the operator. "It's scratching the side of the truck. What the hell is this thing?" Sarah, the operator, tried to keep him calm while dispatching police units to his location. "Sir, keep your doors locked. Help is on the way. Can you describe what you're seeing?" Then a sound that made investigators' blood run cold when they first heard it. "It's looking at me. It's right on the hood, looking directly at me. How can it be seeing me if it has no eyes? Sarah, please, where's the help?" The operating in her voice, an almost imperceptible tremor that suggested even she was being affected by the bizarre nature of the situation. What happened in the next 2 minutes was the subject of intense debate. Marcus described the creature circling the truck, always keeping those dark cavities fixed on him. Board lights flickered erratically. His cell phone began experiencing interference, and indeed in the recording metallic sounds can be distinctly heard, as if something heavy was moving over the vehicle's external surface. There's also that rhythmic clicking, now louder and faster. Then abruptly everything stopped. Total silence for approximately 15 seconds that must have seemed like an eternity to Marcus. He whispered to the operator, "I think it left. I can't see or hear anything anymore." What happened next was captured both in the 911 recording and later witnessed by the officers who arrived at the scene. Marcus described seeing, through the upper side window, fingers, if they could be called that, extremely long and with extra joints, beginning to curl around the windshield edge as if the creature was trying to position itself to look into the cabin. "It's coming from the front. It's going to break the glass." Marcus did the only thing his instinct told him. He ducked completely onto the seat, practically lying on his side, trying to stay out of the line of sight. He gripped the phone so tightly that he later needed treatment for hand pain. His breathing was so rapid that Sarah began instructing him in breathing techniques, worried he might hyperventilate. It was at that moment that red and blue lights finally appeared on the road. Sergeant James DeMarco and Officer Tyler Henderson were the first to arrive. In their official reports, both described seeing something, a tall, pale figure, next to Marcus's truck the moment they turned into the abandoned station's parking lot. But when their headlights illuminated it fully, it moved. Henderson, the younger officer, was more direct. "That wasn't human. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't human." When the officers approached Marcus's truck, he was still crouched inside the cabin, in a state of shock. It took several minutes to convince him to unlock the doors. When he finally got out, he was pale, sweating profusely despite the cold, and his eyes remained fixed on the tree line where the creature had disappeared. The truck was immediately treated as a crime scene. The forensic team that arrived at dawn documented something that elevated this case from a simple nighttime scare to a genuine unsolved mystery. There were marks on the side of the truck, deep scratches in the metal forming patterns that didn't correspond to any known animal or identifiable tool. The marks were long, approximately 30 centimeters each, and appeared to have been made by something extremely sharp. Even more disturbing were the marks on the cabin roof. There were indentations, as if something heavy had been there, and more scratches. But what intrigued investigators were the partial impressions found. When analyzed and magnified, they appeared to show something similar to a human hand, but with fingers that were too long and with extra joints. A forensic fingerprint specialist called to examine the marks was so baffled that he refused to include any speculation in his official report, stating only that the impressions do not correspond to any known human or animal pattern in our database. The audio analysis of the 911 call revealed more layers of mystery. Technicians specialized in forensic audio analysis identified strange frequencies at the moments when Marcus described the creature's clicking sound. These frequencies were partially outside the range of normal human hearing, but when isolated and amplified, they formed a rhythmic pattern that some experts compared to forms of echolocation used by certain animals, though much more complex. But the investigation didn't end there. Detectives began searching for similar cases, and what they found was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. It turns out, Marcus wasn't the first person to report an encounter with something matching that description. In 2003, in a rural area of Tennessee, a woman named Jennifer Lawson had reported being stalked by something she described as a white faceless man with long arms while driving at night. At the time, the report was filed as a possible hallucination or panic. But when North Carolina investigators contacted Tennessee authorities and compared the details, the similarities were impossible to ignore. In 2011, a group of campers in Madison County, also in North Carolina, had reported seeing a tall, pale creature watching their campsite from a distance. They took photos, but due to the distance and low light, the images showed only a blurred, whitish figure among the trees. At the time, it was dismissed as probably being an albino deer or trick of light. And then there were older reports, some dating back to the 1980s and even 1970s, scattered across various southeastern U.S. states, all describing brief encounters with something tall, pale, without clear facial features, with disproportionately long limbs. Many of these reports had never been taken seriously because they came from individual witnesses, often in remote areas, without any physical evidence. Marcus's case was different. There were multiple witnesses, 2 trained police officers. There was physical evidence, the marks on the truck. There was audio documentation, the complete 911 call, and there was the genuine psychological trauma Marcus suffered. In the months following the incident, Marcus developed severe insomnia and anxiety. He couldn't drive at night without experiencing panic attacks. He ended up leaving his job as a truck driver, a 20-year career, because he simply couldn't be on a dark highway anymore without reliving that night. His therapists confirmed he exhibited all the signs of genuine post-traumatic stress disorder. The online community quickly identified the creature described by Marcus as something similar to existing urban legends, particularly an entity known on the internet as the rake, a pale humanoid creature that supposedly stalks and torments victims. But serious investigators pointed out that Marcus, a man in his early 40s who barely used the internet beyond emails and occasional Facebook, was probably not familiar with these creepypasta stories. Dr. Richard Haynes, a cryptozoologist who had studied reports of unknown creatures for 3 decades, traveled to North Carolina to investigate personally. In his analysis, published in a small journal of cryptozoological studies, he proposed that the sightings could represent an unknown species of primate, possibly nocturnal, that evolved unique adaptations to survive in dense forest areas of the American Southeast. The description of elongated arms could be an adaptation for arboreal movement, he wrote. The apparent absence of clear facial features may be an effect of pale skin pigmentation combined with poor lighting, or possibly a rare medical condition in a human individual, such as progeria or alopecia universalis combined with albinism. But this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. How could an unknown primate have remained undetected for so long? And how to explain the clearly predatory or at minimum extremely curious behavior of the creature? Why did it focus so much on Marcus's truck? An alternative theory, proposed by forensic psychologists, suggested that Marcus might have experienced an episode of sleep paralysis or stress-induced hallucination while briefly dozing in his truck. The physical marks, according to this theory, could have been made by previous vandalism that Marcus simply hadn't noticed before. The police officers, arriving at a scene with a clearly terrified man, could have seen shadows or common wildlife, and, in the heat of the moment, misinterpreted what they saw. But this theory had serious problems. Marcus insisted he wasn't sleeping. The officers were trained professionals who made separate and independent reports, both describing something similar, and the forensic analysis of the marks on the truck indicated they were recent, made that night, not old. 6 months after the incident, an undergraduate anthropology student from the University of North Carolina conducted an informal study of the areas around where Marcus had his encounter. She interviewed local residents, many of whom lived on rural properties near large forest expanses. What she discovered was surprising. Several people reported strange experiences over the years. An elderly farmer described finding his cattle inexplicably agitated on several occasions, always around 3 or 4 a.m. Security cameras captured movements in the tree lines, but the images were always too obscure for clear identification. A woman reported hearing strange clicking sounds coming from the forest behind her house during the summer of 2017. Another man mentioned seeing something tall and white quickly crossing the road during a nighttime trip, but thought his eyes were playing tricks. Individually, these reports seemed insignificant, the kind of thing that happens in rural areas and is easily explained or forgotten. But collectively, they painted a picture of something consistently present in the area, something that preferred the night and avoided direct contact with humans, until that night with Marcus. What made Marcus's encounter different? Why was the creature so persistent, so bold? Some speculated that Marcus's truck may have been near a nesting area or territory. Others suggested the creature may have been attracted to the vehicle's lights or sounds. A darker theory proposed that these creatures, whatever they were becoming bolder, less fearful of humans as we expanded more and more into their natural habitats. In November 2019, 8 months after Marcus's incident, there was another report. This time, a couple traveling on Highway 58, about 50 kilometers east of the original encounter location, reported seeing something similar crossing the road ahead of them. They described an extremely tall and thin figure, pale, that moved from the forest on one side of the road to the other, in 2 or 3 impossible steps. When they braked and looked back, there was nothing there. This couple didn't call 911 immediately. Just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it didn't happen.